So today I'm going to introduce you about what is survivorship in STPM ecology. So first of all, the survivorship is defined as the probability that a given individual in a population that will survive to a particular stage. So this particular stage means is either you want to know the survival of a given individual, whether it's at the early stage, where it is normally the infant stage, or we can say it as the elderly stage. So in population ecology terms, it is defined as the percentage of an original population that survives to a given stage. And you will see that for this diagram, or usually in mathematical terms, survivorship curves are drawn by plotting the percentage of survival against the age. So I believe you already observed this diagram and you notice that there are actually three types of the survivorship curve, which is type 1, type 2, and type 3. So let's look at the first, the red curve, which is the type 1 survivorship curve. So you can see that the representative example for this type 1 survivorship curve is the human and then goes to adult, lastly go to the elderly person. So let's go through the description one by one. So type 1 survivorship curve. The important things you need to remember is that probability of survival is the highest at the early stage of the life. And this kind of organism, they will produce less offspring with parental care. The circle and underline words are the important keywords that you need to remember. So since there is the parental care for the young offspring, so they will have the higher probability of survival at the early stage. Because for examples like humans, the fathers and mothers will take care of the babies. So therefore the babies won't die easily and can grow until its adult stage. Because the parents offer parental care. However, as the age increases, the probability of the survival will decrease. Mortality occurs at the older stage of life mainly due to senescence, meaning the people or the organisms already getting old. That's why it starts to die. And mortality means die, or we can say the death rate. So for these kinds of for organisms that have these kinds of type 1 survivorship, so the examples will be human and elephants, and so on and so forth. So here I only list down several types of the examples. Okay, so let's go back to the diagram and we will see that the blue curve now is the type 2 survivorship. So for organisms that shows or having this kind of the curve, firstly you will see they will lay the eggs, and then the eggs will become chick, and then become the adult songbird, and then just continue until it dies. Okay, so let's go with the type 2 survivorship. So you need to know that it is the intermediate between type 1 and type 3. It's just at the middle of the type 1 and type 3. And this is quite interesting because the probability of survival does not change with age. So it is nothing related with the age. Means that at all stages of your life, whether you are a young adult, whether you are young and then you become the adult, and lastly go to older, your probability of survival does not change with age, meaning that, for example, you have 80% of survival at your young age. So when you go to adult, your 80% will still maintain the same. This is what it means by survival rate and the mortality rate are constant throughout your life. And this is very rare in nature. The examples include fish, birds, and lizards. So you need to remember the characteristic of each survivorship and memorize a bit for the examples. Lastly, we go to the type 3 survivorship, which is the green curve. Then you can grow, and you can see that this curve is actually kind of like inversely proportional to the maximum lifespan. So at first, in this curve, it used the plants as the example. So first of all is the seed. After the seed germinates, it will get the small plants, or we say small trees. Lastly, it will get matured and become an adult plant. So let's go for the explanations for the type 3 survivorship. Okay, the probability of survival is the lowest at the early stage of the life. So compared to the type 1 survivorship, we said that the probability for type 1 survivorship of the survivor is the highest at the early stage of life. Right. So actually type 1 and type 3 is kind of like opposite to each other. So this kind of organisms, they will produce more offspring with little or even no parental care, meaning that the parents does not take care of the offspring, they just give birth or reproduce and with little or no parental care. So that's why without this little or no parental care, because the parents does not take care of the young offspring, so the young organisms will have the lower probability of survival. So at 4, as the age increases, the probability will also increases. This is because the small tree now already become a bigger tree, therefore it can survive longer. So the organisms that survive to the older stage of life will have the lower mortality rate, since they already become matured, so they will not die very easily. So the examples of organisms that showing this type of the survivorship will be the insect, hermit crab, and oyster. These examples are the more common one. So we also have other organisms that showing this kind of survivorship. So next, I will going to introduce you about K&R strategies. So actually, these K&R strategies are kind of like they are having the above survivorship, which is either type 1 or type 3. So first of all, these R strategies, we can also give it the name, which is the R strategies species. It has many other names, or R selected species. All these are referring to the same thing. So the name of origin is because the R is actually comes from the growth rate equations, which is meaning the intrinsic rate of increase. And the organisms that having this kind of trait is they can produce many offspring at once. And then little to no parental care, short lifespan, small body size, reproduce early and frequently. Populations often fluctuate widely depending on the environment. So isn't it these traits are actually more like the type 3 survivorship. Any other the other traits that you can write is they have the poor competitive probability. And these organisms usually lack defensive strategies. And then they have the adaptations to environments, with abundant resource. So the examples are just like what I mentioned for the type 3 survivorship, which is the insect, flies, mosquitoes, fish, amphibians, and annual plants. Yeah. So you need to remember that the main characteristic for type 3 survivorship will be there are a lot of organisms that die at a young age and then few survive long. So next, I'm going to introduce you about the K strategies. So same goes to K strategies is also can have some other names, which is like just like these. I'm going to just copy it down and okay, never mind, just copy. So it can also have several names such as the R selected species. K selected species. And then K strategies. The name of the origin is because this K is usually referring to the carrying capacity, which is the K. And then I will introduce you about what is actually carrying capacity after that, of the environment. So the threat will be these organisms, they're having these K strategies or belongs to this group of strategies, which is K. They will produce few offspring, provide high parental care, long lifespan, large body size, reproduce later in life, meaning they will only reproduce when they get into the mature stage, and the populations tends to be stable and close to the carrying capacity. So the examples includes just like what I mentioned for the type 1 survivorship, which is the human, elephants, whales, and even oak trees. So the survivorship curve usually is the type 1, which is the most of the organisms will survive until the old age. But these oak trees, sometimes it can not really accurate also, so you don't remember this as your example. So next, this is the comparison table between the type 1, type 2, and type 3 survivorship. So basically, it just gives you the summarized points for that, so you can read it by yourself. Okay, so next we are going to look at the last content, which is what is meant by carrying capacity. So this carrying capacity has the symbol, which is the capital letter K. So it is the maximum number of individuals that an environment can support sustainably over a long period of time given the available resources such as the food, water, shelter, and space. So basically, it's just very easy to remember is that it is the measure of how the environments can support a maximum number of individuals that it can support over a longer period of time, given that the resources are still very available and the environmental conditions is still favorable. So okay, let's go with if the two types of the possible consequences. So this is the first one and the second one. So let's see if the population exceeds the carrying capacity, which is greater than the K, what will be the effects? So the first thing is that the resources become limited. This is very logic because, for example, if the environment can only support up to 50 organisms in a area, but now the population already grows until 100. It means that it already exceeds the carrying capacity of the environment. So the resources will become limited because many organisms will compete for the food, water, and shelter, and even space. So it will cause to competition, and then some of the organisms that does not get enough available resources will get starved, means starvation. Some of it will even get diseases, predations increase, and then the population will decrease. So if the population now is below the carrying capacity, which means this 50 is still less than the carrying capacity, or we can say 20. We assume this 50 is the ideal carrying capacity by the environment. So let's say now the population has only 20 organisms in the area, so the resources are actually still abundant. So the population will continue to grow until it approaches to K. And then after that, if it grows until it exceeds the carrying capacity, this will happen to get the population still maintains within the carrying capacity. So you can understand it is kind of like it is the environment limit for how many organisms that can live there without degrading the system. So this is just the examples that I gave just now. So for example, there is a small pond that might support 50 frogs, but if there is something that is already exceed the limit, which is the 100 frogs live there, the food and oxygen will definitely run out. The frog deaths will increase, the death rate, or we say the mortality rate, will increase until it backs to the amounts that the environments can support. Hi, so this will be the last part of the video where we are going to learn what is the pattern of dispersion. So in this topic, we are going to learn there are 3 types of the patterns of dispersion. So first of all, you need to understand what is actually a population distribution means. So population distribution is referring to the pattern of the dispersions of organisms relative to each other. So the meaning of relative is to compare. You need to compare one with another one. So let's say we compare A and B. So for population distribution, here we are going to compare the space between each other. So dispersion, basically it means that it is the pattern of spacing among the individuals within the boundaries of the populations. So dispersion is just the distribution pattern where it describes how the individuals of a population are spaced in the environment. So as what I mentioned just now, we have 3 types of patterns of dispersion. So the first type is the clump dispersion. So this is the diagram. So every single green dot over here represents one individual, and the distinct characteristic for clump dispersion is that you will see there are actually several dots that are very close to each other. They gather together. So the description for this type of dispersion, which is the clump dispersion, is that the individuals are grouped together in patches. So this is the most common pattern in nature. So the causes that cause it to cause the organisms to have these kinds of clump dispersion is because they want to compete for the resources, food, water, shelter, because these resources are not evenly distributed. So for examples, the plants and the fungi, they are often clumped where the soil conditions and the other environmental factors favor the germination and growth. And also, this clumping of animals may also be associated with the social behavior such as the mating behavior. For example, the sea stars, they will group together where food is abundant and where they can breed successfully. So this kind of dispersion also helps them to get the protections to avoid themselves being eaten by the predators. So the examples of organisms that show this kind of clump dispersion is lions, fish, and mushrooms. Okay, so next we are going to look at the second pattern of dispersion, which is uniform dispersion. So this is quite easy to understand, where uniform means all the spaces in between the individuals are evenly spaced. They have equal substance to each other. So in uniform distributions, the individuals are evenly spread or spaced from each other. And it occurs when the competition is severe. So the natural phenomenon that we can see is that it occurs when the leaf or the roots of a plant that produce toxins to inhibit the growth of the plants nearby, or by the territory behavior of certain animals. This is because the resources are not evenly are very limited. That's why they want to secrete. For plants, they will secrete the toxin to inhibit the other plants from colonizing the area. So the examples will be penguins nesting in the colonies, so they will keep each other in a fixed distance. And the examples for plants will be the desert plants, which is the cactus or scrubs, that space evenly to minimize the competition for water. Okay, for the last pattern of dispersion will be the random dispersion, where there does not have a very obvious pattern and they tends to colonize a locations very randomly. So the description is just that the individuals are distributed unpredictably without a clear pattern. This is the keyword. So the causes to let them have this kind of random dispersion is because the resources are very abundant, where it means that you can get the resources very easily. You can almost find your needed resources everywhere. So there is no strong attractions or repulsion among the individuals. So for examples, like the dandelions scattered by wind. When the wind blows on the dandelions, they will fly and just fly to anywhere where they stop. So it means that actually they can live wherever. So it means that the resources are abundant. So there are also some tree species that in the tropical rainforest, they also show this kind of random dispersion. So that's all for me for this topic, which is the ecology topic you need to know in the STPM. And thanks for watching.